I'll speak to a panel of experts about the big issues facing the aviation sector and what it needs to do to survive and thrive. Hello everybody. Hello Gloria, it's Juliet Mann in the studio in London. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, look, thanks for taking part. After the break, they'll be coming to us. I'll do a short introduction, and there are three of you on my panel. We'll have about 9 minutes into the live show, but then we'll continue the conversation on Facebook afterwards. So please do hang around until we've got through it all. I'm really excited to talk to you about what the future of travel, its longevity, and what changes passengers can expect, that big focus on safety. Does that sound all right?
Sure.
Fantastic, thank you. And is Andrew there? Can Andrew hear me as well?
Sure, loud, clear as a bell.
Fantastic. Oh, you're in Switzerland. Well, that's then a good place to have a lockdown. Lots of nice mountain walks, I hope.
Everybody's got to be somewhere, haven't they?
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And it's neon, yeah, in Switzerland?
Yeah, neon
okay.
in Switzerland.
Okay, but with a Y, as in, yeah, not the lights. Really keen if you talk about the panic in pandemic. That would be fantastic. And this missed opportunity. The missed opportunity.
The cheap lines are the good lines, aren't they?
Yeah. I love it. I love all of that. So brilliant. So please stand by, everybody. We're going to have a great discussion. Oh, another 2 minutes. All right. Okay. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Robin. And welcome to this special panel on the aviation sector as we look at what the future holds for airports, for airlines and for passengers like you and me. And hello also to those who are joining us on Facebook. You can join the conversation. You can send us your questions or your comments in the comments bar on Facebook. So do that and get involved. Now, my guests today, an illustrious panel. We've got Andrew Charlton, who's the Managing Director of the consultancy Aviation Advocacy. We have Gloria Guevara, who's the President and CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council, and also joining us is travel writer and editor Lee Hayhurst. He's at Travel Weekly Group and at Travolution. Well, first of all, panellists, I'd like to start talking about bailouts. I mean, many airlines have been brought to the brink of collapse due to COVID, but governments have stepped in. There have been bailouts for the Dutch arm of KLM, for Air France, for Portugal's TAP, for the Lufthansa. In fact, state handouts for continental airlines come to about $25 billion worth of aid. So, Andrew Charlton, should the airlines be rescued?
A very complicated question. Should airlines perform a very important function? Do we need airlines? Yes, we do. Should the airlines be bailed out indiscriminately? Absolutely not. I think there are bailouts that are completely appropriate, and I think there are bailouts that are just throwing good money after bad, to be frank. What we need is a lot more discretion and a lot more intelligence in the way that we're doing the bailing out. And there are a lot of issues in that. Perhaps during the course of the afternoon, we can talk about those things.
Lee, if I could bring you in here, there are lots of diverse conditions, aren't there, that are tied to some of these bailouts. Do you think that's going to make it work any more smoothly?
I think there are some conditions, but there are some conditions the industry would like to see more of. So one of the problems since the close down of international travel has been customers getting their refunds from airlines, and actually the entire travel ecosystem getting the money back through from the airlines who have the money and haven't been able to pay it back. So I think for the industry, they would like to have seen a condition: if you're going to be bailed out by your government, then you release these funds back through the ecosystem. Because at the moment, the customers are going to the travel agents, the tour operators, paying for their money. They legally are obliged to have it back. For the airlines, it's 7 days. For operators, it's 14 days, and nobody's actually paying back in that time. So yeah, there may be some conditions in terms of the way they operate and some of the things that the government wants to see. But I think for an industry that is really struggling to look after their customers at the moment, that would be a great condition to put that in.
Lee, look, this is a sector that's had huge problems even before the pandemic. What is unique, would you say, about this crisis?
I think this is, the sector goes through crises on a regular basis because all the big things that happen in the world affect travel. So if it's a terrorist attack or if it's an Icelandic volcano going off. But I think what's unique about this one is we've seen a collapse in both supply and demand at the very same time. And previously, you may see demand go, maybe when the financial crash happened, or supply just dries up, as with the Icelandic volcano, but for a short time. Here, we've had both go at the same time. It's just unprecedented. And you know, there was a period, I guess, a couple of months ago where it just looked like the entire industry was going out of business. I mean, even the bigger you were, the more danger you were in because you couldn't get your costs down, and there was no money coming in. And indeed, there was money going out because you had to refund business that you'd already sold. So it's not like closing down a factory. You can go into hibernation. You have to actually find the funds and the people to administer those funds back to the customers. You're going backwards. You're going forward. You suddenly have to go into reverse. It's extremely difficult for the industry.
So many areas of the sector being starved of cash. So let's talk about the future of travel. And Gloria, I want to bring you in on this one because while lockdown is being eased, it's very far from business as usual. Yes, we have airlines like American Airlines saying that demand and passenger numbers are recovering. And we've heard that Orly Airport, as many others all around Europe, are starting to open. People are travelling. But do you think that travel and tourism can ever really bounce back?
Absolutely. At WTTC, as you know, we represent the global private sector, and we have analyzed 90 different situations of crisis in the last 20 years, and every single time we have recovered. We believe people will continue traveling. It's just a matter of recovering trust and making sure that we take the right decisions, for instance, implementing the right protocols to reduce the risk. That's very important, and a lesson learned after 9/11, that in that case, we didn't work that effectively implementing the right protocols. Also, travel barriers. We need to make sure that when countries are ready to open, we don't have travel barriers such as quarantines or travel bans that will create just concern and not build or not help to build the confidence back from the travelers. So we believe that we make the right decisions, and we also work public and private, and also have a great coordination among countries. We can recover. The outbreaks at the beginning, the first that we had in the last 20 years, it took us 34 months to recover. The last one was 10 months. Yes, those were very regional. This is different. This is global. However, if we have global solutions and have a better approach, I think that we will recover for sure.
But Andrew, you think that the sector's having a bit of an existential crisis, don't you?
I do, and I thought Lee put it very well. You know, very seldom do you see a collapse in supply and demand. We're having an existential crisis for a number of reasons, though. One is that and I speak now of the aviation part of the industry. The tourism industry is much broader than aviation, of course. The aviation industry is governed by a regulatory framework that was written in 1944, which was, of course, before the invention of the jet engine. And it struggles enormously to continue to be able to cope with these sorts of changes. We're also having an existential crisis, I think, because we've never had this sort of medical issue before. After 9/11 and after the shoe bomber, the aviation industry, which is very self-contained, had to all of a sudden go and introduce itself to the security regulators. And it took us a few years to rub together with those guys until eventually we found a more comfortable way of working. Then we had to rub together or find a new way to work with the environmental regulators, another area the airline industry, frankly, had ignored for a long time. And now we're going to have to go and learn all that stuff again, this time how the health industry regulates itself, or how the health regulators operate. And as Gloria said, that's going to take some time till we can find protocols of how we operate, some safety and procedures, all those sorts of health things that we've never done before. But in the middle of all this, I have to come back to a point that you sort of alluded to earlier. Before the crisis, on the 1st of January this year, there were only 30 profitable airlines in the world, or big airlines in the world, 30. And now, of course, we've put those under the sword, or to the sword as well. And so we are now in a place where we have an opportunity, if we choose to grasp it, to restructure, reshape, reform and build a modern, forward-looking industry. Although, unfortunately, the bailouts have worked to preserve the status quo rather than to build us towards the future. So I'm a little bit cross with many of the bailouts. I understand why politicians do them. They need to get voted into office or get voted back into office. But frankly, if you were starting at scratch, you wouldn't build an aviation industry that looked like this.
So there's an opportunity to do things a little bit differently. Lee, I'd like to bring you back in. We've got quarantine, we've got new regulations. What do you think the future is of the holiday?
Well, it's in terms of demand side, I think it's very positive, and that has to be conditional on what the coming recession will do to people's ability to pay for a holiday. So that it has to be conditional on that. And we hope, obviously, that governments can work to mitigate the impact on the economy. But when people have got money, they spend it on holidays, and increasingly so. So I think any barometer that you will see, particularly in the UK, but I think it's true of many countries, the annual holidays become a spend item that has gone up the list of things you protect. So you put it higher than maybe a new car or a new kitchen, and it's stayed there, and it's been very resilient. So there has to be positivity that people want to go on holiday. At the moment, we've got some great weather in the UK. And the beaches in the UK are absolutely full of people because they want to get out and have what is a holiday. And I've just been speaking to one of our partners who does a price comparison for holidays, and they're seeing, they've done some research, 90% of people say they want to go on holiday the next year of their clients. So there's definitely going to be the demand. I think the question is about supply now, because the airline industry is based on people's, well, it has to make money. As Andy says, they don't make that much money. They make money when people turn left on the aircraft, and they need people to buy those premium seats. And that business travel side of things is under probably more threat than leisure, but that funds the leisure side of it. So there has to be a question about the airline economics, because without that, the entire industry might suffer.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Even big airlines like Australia's Qantas saying that international travel isn't going to resume as normal until July 2021. Well, all of you, please stay where you are, Gloria, Lee and Andrew. And we're going to be going back to Global Business Europe. But of course, this conversation is going to continue on Facebook. So keep those questions coming in. For now, back to you, Jamie. We're going to continue this conversation, a short pause there while we come out of the Global Business Europe on CGTN Europe, but we are still on Facebook Live. So we've covered a little bit about the bailouts, we've looked at the future of travel and how expectations in terms of the holiday might change. I'd now like to talk a little bit about passenger safety. That's what the buzz is now, isn't it? That's what the buzz is at airports around the world. That check-in, that flight experience has completely changed. We've seen that before. After 9/11, it was all about security. The focus now is very much on hygiene and on social distancing, about making passengers and about making airline staff and of course, the airport staff, making them feel safe. So, Gloria, governments really do have their work cut out, don't they? What's it going to take to bring customers and passengers back and make them feel that flying and holidays is safe again?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think it's important, this collaboration, public and private. Yes, the governments have to help us. They need to be enabling the return of the sector. They need to send a clear message. They need to provide a clear framework, but also they need to help us to implement the best protocols. As in the case of 9/11, they work very independent in silos. Every country defined pretty much their own safety standards and protocols without any input from the private sector. And at the very beginning, when we were restarting travel after 9/11, it was truly a nightmare. It was very complicated. Even years later, before COVID at the airports, the screening is still different. In some places, they ask you to remove shoes. In some places, they don't. There are no standards. And that exactly is what creates uncertainty. And that is very complicated to rebuild trust from the traveler. So in this case, the private sector has taken a stand to build protocols for the different industries. And in the case of aviation and airports, we have to follow the guidelines from ICAO that are very clear. And they can help us to define that experience. But for sure, we need to make clear that the experience has to be the same. If you're going to wear a mask in one flight, it needs to be in all the flights, not one yes or one not, because that lack of clarity and different experience is going to create more confusion to the travelers, we believe. So the coordination, public-private, is key. And also the part of the traveler, I think, is going to be very important.
That confusion, that concern over different airlines and different airports doing different things in terms of security is something that many are thinking about, of course, isn't it, Gloria? Because in terms of safety, they don't want to change all of their protocols, introduce new things, and then find out in 6 months' time that there's a vaccine and maybe those protocols aren't necessarily needed. Andrew, the industry, the aviation industry, a bit like the aircraft that still fly, they look very much like they did decades ago. So, to what extent do you think this really is a chance to reshape things? You mentioned before there's an opportunity here. Practically, though, is it possible?
There's an old saying in aviation, it's impossible to change the engine while the aircraft is flying along. Well, look outside. They're not flying at the moment. So there is an opportunity if we choose to take it. The problem, of course, is that incumbents are, by definition, incumbent. And they don't need to change it because they are incumbent. I think what we need is the rest of the industry, the broader tourism industry and other parts of the global industry, saying that some of these restrictions and rules are frankly antediluvian, and it's time we started to change them. I can give you examples from across the spectrum, of course. Airlines, for example, are hampered, and that's the right word, completely by the requirement to raise capital only from their own country. Airlines must be substantially owned and effectively controlled by nationals of the country in which the airline is registered. That's fine if you're from the US or continental Europe, for example, but it makes it extremely difficult if you're from New Zealand or even Australia. And I speak from experience, having worked for many years with Qantas, to raise money on that quite narrow market. In air traffic control, another area of obviously fundamental importance, we still control aeroplanes as if it's 1948. We use VHF radio and radar, both of which, incidentally, are World War I technologies, not even World War II technologies. There's an enormous opportunity for us to find efficiencies and sensible ways of controlling those sorts of things. We have the slot rules, for example, which govern how airlines can access airports. was written in the 70s by the airlines for the benefit of the incumbents. It means that you have very little competition at airports and very little ways to introduce competition. It means that the travel and tourism industry is always at the beck and call of some of these ridiculously antiquated rules in the aviation industry. Just to pick up, though, if I may, for a moment, Juliet, on a couple of the other things, I think it's important we distinguish between holidays and travelling, or holidays and international travel. I agree with you. I agree with Alan Joyce, the CEO of Qantas, that there won't be long-haul international travel in any recognisable form for at least a year, if not more. But I think we'll still be able to take holidays. It's just that we're going to have to look at reshaping some of the holidays that we take, where we take them, domestic tourism, staycations, things like that. We all love a holiday. Who doesn't want to go on holiday? God knows I do. But I think we're going to have to be very clever in the way in which we restructure some of those things.
Now, some of the things you've touched on are sustainability and the environment, that move to staycations, being part of a bigger conversation about going green. I want to come on to that on a moment, because we've just had a question through from Facebook. And Gloria, I'm going to ask you this one. If holidays are going to change, and airports are going to change and airlines are going to change, will airline fares rise?
Well, that will be unfortunately. And let me just clarify something that I think is important. Here we see two phases, before the vaccine and after the vaccine. And it's very important to highlight that, because the protocols that we're implementing are before the vaccine. You will see one experience before the vaccine and hopefully a different experience similar to what we had in the past, just with the health component after the vaccine. Now, we hope that the fares will not raise, because if you don't have enough offer, if you don't have enough demand, if you don't have the prices that we had before, then we're going to go back perhaps 20 or 30 years when flying, it was just for a high income of individuals, that they had the luxury to take flights and to travel. And that will be really unfortunately, because we have come a long way and now people can move, can travel, can enjoy an amazing destination because of how competitive the prices have been. But if we increase the prices because there's not enough demand and enough offer, of course, then it's going to be complicated, and a lot of individuals are not going to be able to have a nice holiday.
So, of course, there's the financial cost, but there's also the cost to the environment. And Lee, I'd like to bring you in on this one. I mean, pre-pandemic, there was lots of flight shaming. Even today, as Orly Airport opens, and we've got Extinction Rebellion who are out there. And this is a sector that has been slowly introducing green agendas. But do you think that net zero is now on standby?
Is that a question for me? Yeah. Is that for Lee? Sorry.
I was going to go for Lee first, but I'd love you to come in afterwards. Lee, let's start with you.
I think inevitably, this is a sector that requires you to put kerosene into engines, and that's never really going to change. As there's vague hopes of electric flying, but I think nobody in the industry believes that's going to really come in that quickly, particularly long haul. So this isn't a sector that's suddenly going to go net zero. It is going to, however, stand out more against other sectors that can change. But I think this goes back to the story about bailouts and government support. I know in this country, EasyJet gets very frustrated, and they are a leisure holiday. They're a leisure airline. They don't really rely on business travel to make that money, and they have brought in very cheap fares, like as Gloria mentioned, which has expanded people's ability to travel. But they get very frustrated because the kind of airlines that have got the bailouts from governments, the flag carriers, also operate the dirtiest fleets, the oldest fleets. They also operate with lower load factors. So they are essentially the biggest polluters within an industry that is essentially going to be polluting. And they don't get any incentive, as far as EasyJet is concerned, no incentive to run a younger fleet to fill their aircraft more efficiently. They pay the same amount in taxes, they pay the same amount in takeoff and landing fees and so on. And they feel that they're doing the right thing, but they're not incentivized to do it, and their rivals are not also incentivized to change their ways. So maybe that's something that is going to have to change after.
So Gloria, let's follow up with you. I mean, COVID safe is the name of the game now, but what about sustainability? Is that still a priority for travellers?
I think so. It's a priority not only for travelers, but for the entire industry. I think that COVID has help us to accelerate a couple of agendas, the digital agenda for sure, and then of course the sustainable agenda is another one. There were a lot of things that we were doing before COVID. For instance, in WTTC, We had our first climate summit in New York during the Climate Week in 2019, and we made the commitment of achieving certain goals. And here, what's important is how do we move faster towards that? And instead of, I think in the case of the airlines, yes, it's a big challenge. And more than talking about polluting, we need to talk about how do we decarbonize? What is it that needs to be done in order for everyone to get there? Yes, there are some dependencies on the technology and the solutions available, but there are a lot of things that we can see and we can do that are happening, that we need to move faster towards that goal. And this is a concern for all the suppliers, not only for the travelers, I would say, it's for everyone.
So there's no one size fits all. The industry is really in survival mode, and there are lots of different things that are playing into this in terms of streamlining, in terms of consolidation. We might be seeing a lot more of that. And perhaps passengers, travellers, business and leisure are also going to have different conversations with themselves in terms of where they travel and how they travel. It's been a super conversation. You've given us some great insights. But before we go, I'd like to have your final thoughts, all of you. So Andrew, let's start with you. What one thing would, if you could change, what would you like to see the airline industry adopt?
Goodness, I would like to see the airline industry move from being an industry of national companies that sometimes fly to other countries to being an international industry where they fly in a very passenger-centric way and have a different relationship with the rest of the ecosystem that supports them, which includes the airports, the air traffic control agencies, and indeed the tourism industry. I could talk for about 4 hours non-stop on that point, if you'd like me to, Julia.
Unfortunately, we don't have 4 hours, but I think this opportunity that's there, an opportunity to reshape, is what I'm taking away from what you've had to say, and looking back at history and thinking, right, this is a chance to shake things up. Gloria, what one change would you like the tourism sector to put in place?
I think that, I mean, as I say before, I think the positive side of this situation, the COVID, is that now finally we're putting in context the value of travel and tourism, right? Not only in terms of the economy and 10% of the global GDP and 330 million jobs, but also the social impact that we make when people travel, the reduction of poverty, the opportunities for women, and all of that. So I would like to see, if there is one thing that I would like to see, I would like to see greater or actually better leadership and better collaboration, public and private, so that we can get out of this situation in a more coordinated way. Right now, we see a lot of silos, different decisions, different solutions that unfortunately are slowing down this recovery process, which is impacting millions of families around the world.
Well, thank you, Gloria. And Lee, how do you think your holiday experience is going to be changing?
Yes, that's a good question. I think certainly in the short term, people are going to be slightly more wary of crowds, and obviously so much of the holiday experience is all about people going to the same place at the same time. So, even from the airport, I think we're going to find technology will be brought in to try to manage that, so to move people around. And actually that can be used then to move people away from hotspots. We've seen issues around over-tourism in certain places. And the answer to that is to move people around more efficiently, because the countries those hotspots are in still need those tourists. There's plenty of space for them to go. So I suspect we're going to maybe go back to a sort of people holidaying a little bit away from the hotspots and the crowds, looking for something a little bit more retreat-like until we get more assurance and reassurance. I think when a vaccine comes in, it's all up for grabs again, because we can just go back, I guess, to the way it was before. But hopefully, long term, the impact of this is that people are thinking more carefully about the impact of all tourism, and that it really does benefit those places we go to in our large numbers.
So we'll all be thinking a lot more about tourism, about travel, perhaps holidaying away from those hotspots. In terms of what you'd like to see is better leadership, more collaboration, because it's a huge and complex industry with lots that overlaps. And you think that if public and private organisations can collaborate and have more coordination, then perhaps the recovery could be sped up. But also, let's look at the big picture. There's an opportunity here. There was a lot of challenges that the industry faced before the pandemic. Organisations like Wikipedia already looking to streamline many of their businesses. Airlines already hemorrhaging cash. So perhaps this is a chance to say, right, we've got too many, there needs to be consolidation. I think one thing is for certain, this is the travel and tourism sector is going to be changing in years to come, COVID or no COVID. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking part. It's been so interesting, lots for us to think about. Thank you also to everybody from Facebook who's been logging in as well. It's all we have time for, unfortunately, but a big thank you to our excellent panel, Andrew Charlton, Gloria Guevara, and Lee Hayhurst. Thanks again for joining us. If you want to find out more about aviation in the future and how travel and tourism is changing, do visit our website, europe.cgtn.com. But for now, from me, Juliette Mann, and all of the team here in London, goodbye.